In my last theory, I brought up the idea that Molten Freddy, the tangled mess of old animatronics we burnt to a crisp in Pizzeria Simulator, isn't haunted by the victims of the missing children's incident, as a lot of us had believed up until now, but instead by the victims of the second missing children's incident, the one we hear about in FNAF 2. Now, I expected that theory to get a lot of backlash, but what I wasn't prepared for was for that theory to garner over 3,000 views. Now that's more views than every other video I have ever made combined. Heck, I didn't expect it to get 800 views, let alone 3,000. And the feedback from that theory has been so much more positive and kind than I ever expected. I even discovered that, unlike what I thought beforehand, I wasn't the only person who was thinking this. Meaning that either I'm not crazy, or we're all crazy. And honestly, I don't care which one it is. However, while that's all fine and good, I know the real reason you clicked on this video. And that's to find out what I believe happened to the souls of the missing children's incident if they didn't go on to possess Molten Freddy. So, without any further ado, let's jump right into that. First things first, let's recap what I proposed in that previous video for those of you who may not have watched that theory. In that video, I proposed that the concept known as Molten MCI, the theory that the souls of the victims from the missing children's incident would go on to be melted down into Remnant and infused into the Fun Times, who then went on to become Molten Freddy, was actually false. And instead, the souls that would make the most sense in this role would be those of the FNAF 2 murders, the souls that went on to possess the toy animatronics, as it seems to work better that way on both a timeline and a character basis. What this means outside of that, though, is that the original souls from that first murder spree are now available for more theorizing as to where they could be and what their endgame looks like. So here we are, back in the FNAF 1 location. The back room has just been boarded up, with William Afton trapped inside, slowly fusing with his metal and felt prison, while the old animatronic suits are being put back together and relocated to a new location so they can once again be put to work entertaining children. Now this new location I'm referring to is the location that we see during the gameplay of the original Five Nights at Freddy's game. If you can recall, FNAF 2 takes place before the events of the first game, not only timeline-wise, but location-wise as well. Meaning that there have either been 3 locations constructed by the events of the first game, or the first location was reopened after the closing of the FNAF 2 location to save Fazbear Entertainment some money. Either way, it doesn't really affect the story all that much, so I'm going to say we play in a new location in FNAF 1 just to make things a bit easier. We can also infer that something to this effect has to have taken place for a few reasons. For one, if you look at the versions of the animatronics that show up in the Follow Me minigames, you'll note that the animatronics, specifically Freddy, have a series of buttons running down their torsos, just like some stuffed bears do in real life. Now this design element is not consistent with the designs of the animatronics we see in FNAF 1, which should indicate that these are 2 different sets of animatronics. Except, if you take a look at Withered Freddy from FNAF 2, you can see those same buttons on his torso. And what makes this detail super important is that we know from the games that the withered animatronics are supposed to be old, broken down versions of the original gang of animatronics, who were eventually fixed up and shipped off to the new location, becoming the characters we know and love from the first game. Not to mention, we know the originals were haunted, and so seeing spirits being released from the animatronics as William tears them apart is a pretty strong connection anyways. But it's always good to have a few different points of connection. So now, let's move forward in time a bit, past the events of the first game to roughly the year 2023. The year that most of the fanbase believes that FNAF 3 takes place. And the reason for the time jump is because this is where the next big piece of information surrounding the original Souls takes place, the Happiest Day minigames. In this minigame, you control what looks to be a rendition of the puppet, a character last seen in FNAF 2, and the animatronic possessed by Charlie, the daughter of Henry Emily, as she makes her way through a party full of what looks to be kids in colorful masks. Now, as you move the puppet to the right, you are eventually met with one final table. Sitting around it are 5 entities, 4 of whom seem to be wearing colorless variations of the main 4 animatronics masks. While sitting at the far end of the table is a young boy, with streams of tears running down his face. And unlike all the rest of the tables you pass, which all have large 3-tiered cakes sitting on them, this last table does not. That is, until you walk up to it. Because when you do, a cake appears on the table, almost as if you had placed it there. Then the boy puts on his own animatronic mask, just before all 5 of the kids and the puppet disappear, leaving behind their masks to fall gracefully to the floor. This is what is known by the community as the happiest day, as it is theorized by many people that this minigame depicts 4 of the 5 missing children, as well as the crying child, William Afton's son, who was killed by Fredbear as seen in the FNAF 4 minigames, as well as Charlie, as they are all finally put to rest, as depicted by the masks they were all wearing falling to the floor. One thing the community has been debating for a while now is when exactly this event is supposed to have taken place timeline-wise. We first see the minigame in FNAF 3, and many people speculate that that means it has to have taken place in 2023. Else, why would Scott have added it there? But, while we do get a glimpse of the puppet during FNAF 3 on very rare occasions, I don't think the happiest day can take place during FNAF 3 for the fact that the puppet is present during the events of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Simulator, more popularly known in the community as FNAF 6. If you can recall, in FNAF 6, when you see Lefty slumped over in the alleyway before you bring him in for his interview, it's sitting in such a way that you can see in between its body panels and down to the wiring underneath. And what do we see through those gaps? A black and white striped cylindrical wire that looks exactly like the puppet's arms, which led a lot of people to theorize that the puppet was actually inside of the Lefty animatronic. Though those theories would end up being pointless, as during the insanity ending of FNAF 6, Henry just outright reveals that this is the case through the blueprints that pop up on the monitor, as well as in the main ending when he references that his daughter is in the building, and we know that his daughter, Charlie, is possessing the puppet, meaning that the theorists were correct in their assumptions. So when else could Happiest Day take place? Well, I believe that the best possible time and place for Happiest Day to have happened would have to be during the events of Pizzeria Simulator and in that location. I mean, let's take a look back at the minigame for a second. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that there were several other kids in that minigame, all of whom were wearing colorful masks. 5, to be exact. And if you look really closely at the masks, you want to know what immediately jumped out at me? The color and shape of the 5 masks is almost a 1-to-1 match to each of the 5 mediocre melodies that make their debut in Pizzeria Simulator. Green, like Happy Frog, pink, like Pig Patch, purple, like Mr. Hippo, orange, like Orville Elephant, and blue, which is the only mask that color-wise doesn't match up. And, moreover, not all of the masks match 1-to-1 with their mediocre melodies counterparts design-wise, as the green mask looks more like Monty Gator than it does Happy Frog, but I'm willing to look past these few inconsistencies, because the inclusion of a group of animatronics in Pizzeria Simulator that are almost identical to the masks is too big of a detail to throw away just because of a couple of differences here and there. And again, this is FNAF we're talking about. But I hear you all asking, how did the souls get there if they weren't inside Molten Freddy? Well, and I have a feeling that this is going to make a lot of people either mad or confused, so just give me a few minutes to explain my reasoning before you take to the comments with your pitchforks and your torches. But I think that the best explanation for their souls being in the location is that Lefty is just like Molten Freddy.
What? What?
Hey, what did I say about the pitchforks? Put them down. Come on. Just give me some time to explain my reasoning before you attack me on a personal level. Alright? Alright. Let's do this. The thing that first set my mind in motion was the aforementioned blueprints shown to us in the Insanity ending. And specifically the idea that Lefty was created as a way to capture the puppet and transport her to this new location. But that didn't sit well with me, because from everything that I've ever known about the puppet, and Charlie as a whole, she wouldn't be content to just sit idly by as the monster that she's been trying to save everyone from just goes to another pizzeria. Heck, the puppet is the only animatronic that I would bet money on to follow Afton anywhere he goes. Because her whole purpose seems to be cleaning up after him and setting all the souls that he torments free. So the idea that she, of all the animatronics, needed to be captured and brought here against her will just didn't sit right with me. And it couldn't be the case that the puppet can't move independently, because during one of the minigames in FNAF 6, we watch as the puppet leaves the pizzeria and crawls along the ground to Charlie's side in the pouring rain to try and save her life after William killed her. So we know that the puppet can move around on her own, meaning that she would have made it to the new pizzeria on her own power eventually. So then, what is Lefty's point in the game if it's not to transport Charlie? Simple. Lefty was created to transport the rest of the children's souls to the new location so that every spirit could be set free all at the same time. So that no loose ends were left open after the fact. Because Henry knew that if he left even one soul out of the fire, that Charlie would never be able to rest, not until that one soul was set free. And thus, neither would his spirit. Not until she was finished. And I have even more evidence of this thought coming from FNAF 6. Specifically, the aspect of the game that has stumped almost everybody up to this point. The Candy Cadet. Specifically this story about the 5 orphans and the old man.
Now I will tell you a story. A story about a kind man who would visit 5 orphans and bring them toys and gladness. The man lived alone, and lived in fear that someone might break into the house of one of the 5 children, so he adopted all 5, and brought them together in one place, in his own home. He promised them to never leave them, and they promised to always come home, and never stay out too late. He left one day to buy food, his heart being filled with gladness, but returned to find that the burglar had chosen his home, and killed all 5 of the children. The man could only afford one coffin, so he stitched the 5 bodies together to make one, and buried the child. That night, there was a knock at the door.
This story, as pointed out by ID's Fantasy, seems to be talking about Henry. Henry being the kind old man in this story. But instead of adopting the 5 children, he built a pizzeria, a place where they could go and eat and play and be happy. And instead of a burglar coming in and killing the orphans, it was his business partner, William Afton, that did it. And then you get to the final part where the old man puts them all together to fit them into one casket. But while ID's Fantasy believes that this part is merely metaphorical, I interpret it literally. I interpret it as Henry, after figuring out what Afton had done and hatching his pizzeria simulator plan, going back to where the OG animatronics were being stored, melting them down and infusing them into a brand new animatronic, Lefty. Meaning that Lefty wasn't created to capture the puppet, but to instead be worn by the puppet, like a mech suit. Specifically designed to transport those souls to what would hopefully be their final resting place. This also, I feel, adds an extra parallel between Henry and William. Seeing as William fused a group of souls together in an attempt to make himself immortal, working for selfish reasons, whereas Henry would have done the same thing but for completely selfless reasons. To bring all the souls together and sacrifice himself to set them all free. Proving why Henry is the good guy in a series full of spirits and murderous robots. But now, with all that being said, there's still one question I have yet to answer. And that's because I don't know the answer. And that's where Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, was while all of this was going down. Because in every appearance of the missing children's, there's always only 4 of them paired with the crying child who is supposed to be inside of Golden Freddy with Cassidy. And since I don't think we've ever seen Golden Freddy appear in between FNAF 2 and Ultimate Custom Night, what happened to him? That's a question that I intend to answer eventually, but as of right now, I have no idea. But if y'all have any idea as to where everyone's favorite golden murder bot is, then go ahead and leave it down in the comments below, right alongside your polite and well-reasoned thoughts about today's episode. With all that being said, thank y'all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel while you're down there. You have no idea how much it means to me to see all of you guys enjoying the content that I put out. And if you're football fans, and particularly Pittsburgh Steelers fans, then check out my channel Steel Nation in the description down below, where I talk about nothing but the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's all I got for you today, so until next time, take care.